I saw an interesting story this morning, and it pertains to Whole Foods, but it applies to literally every retailer out there. Because I'm sure you went shopping right before the blizzard. I went shopping for the blizzard. I bought like 4 gallons of water just on the off case that,
Sure.
I'm such an idiot. Anyway,
Yeah, keeping in mind that you live in a high-rise apartment building.
I don't know. Anyway, I got a baby to think of.
Yeah, of course.
So basically, everybody's stockpiling food and supplies, and you hear about this every time like a hurricane comes and all this stuff. Bottom line, is this big business for stores? Does it matter?
Well, you actually brought up a really good point when we were coming down to the studio. So, this is something that came up as well for me personally. Last night, we went to our nearby Giant in our neighborhood, and there were like very little fresh produce, no eggs whatsoever.
It looked like the apocalypse, right?
Very little milk. The bread aisle it was, ravaged essentially, and
in order to check out, you had to go through the Thunderdome.
So, Gina had asked me, like, is this like this 1 week essentially boon in sales all over the Northeast, huge population centers, does that end up having an impact for some of these, for a company like Kroger's, Whole Foods Market, things along those lines? And ultimately, I started to look into it, but I realized like it's such a short term, blip on the radar. Sure, it was a big storm, 20 plus
and they definitely
inches.
sell things they wouldn't normally buy. I don't usually buy 4 jugs of water.
Exactly. So there's definitely a lift, and you could even argue that stores that sell like salt for sidewalks and shovels will benefit, but it's such a small blip. It's seasonal.
It is not a consistent cash flow thing.
Snow's gonna fall every year, so yeah, it's not something that I would consider to be even close to the basis for like I want to buy Whole Foods now.
Well, and it might even be playing catch up because I remember a month ago. It was basically when Macy's and Nordstrom and everybody were reporting, and they're like, yeah, our quarters have stunk so far because it's been really warm.
Yes.
And one of the highest margin things they sell is winter coats because you gots to have one, and they can charge full price, and da-da. And people were putting it off. We had several 50, 60-degree days in December here. I rode my bike a couple of weeks ago for the heck of it.
Yeah, no, you bring up a really good point. So on the one hand, we can the retailers have argued that the extended time or in the extended warm weather during the winter hurt them, but in this case, with all the snow falling, suddenly people have this stark realization, like, oh, okay, like
I have to think that a few winter coats were sold last week.
Yeah,
before
exactly.
The storm arrived.
So will that help some of the apparel retailers bounce back a little bit for when they report this first quarter of the year? We'll see what happens. But again,
maybe, but
it's going to be probably more of a minimal effect than anything else. But it's interesting to think about and how there's economics to these blizzards.
Yeah, I'll never forget, and then we'll move on. This is like 10 years ago, and CNBC did this special on the age of Walmart. And I don't know if our listeners are aware, but Walmart has they basically have supercomputers, like deep blue type crazy awesome computers. And they have all this data on what sells when and all this stuff. And they gave this example of how more people right before a hurricane in Florida and the Carolinas and stuff.
Of course.
They are 26% more likely to buy strawberry Pop-Tarts with an impending hurricane than they are at any other time. So right before the hurricane hits, Walmart's down there stock their shelves with about 20-30% extra strawberry Pop-Tarts.
Yeah, maybe put it right front and center for when people walk in.
Isn't that crazy? What in the human brain says hurricane strawberry Pop-Tart? Like how
days at home. Yeah. Breakfast, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Non-perishable for a certain period of time. Anyway, okay.